So Pastor John, it's March 2022 and we're here at Carrickalinga camp for our leadership camp. We're going to talk about the history of this camp because it goes back a long way, back to the mid-70s. So where did it all start? Where did the idea of this camp come from?
Well, our fellowship was up at Elizabeth at the time. That's where where things got really going, and we had an assembly of about 200 people, and we used to go at Easter time down to the Lutheran youth camp at Clarendon.
Yep.
And we had such a great time with all the folks together. We, had most of our assembly would go to the camp.
Yes.
And so at the end, I walked into the men's toilets, and some of our good, helpful brothers were in there, most of them tradesmen. They were cleaning up, and they said, "Oh, we've been talking," as they do, and they said, "We want to get our own camp." I said, "Well, that's all very fine, but where are we going to get the money?" They said, "You organise the money and we'll do the work." Well, they've kept them at it. Still, all these years later, some of them are still alive and still working. So we started looking, and we had a list of wants. There was about 5 of them. We wanted to be somewhere near a nice beach.
Which we've got.
Yes. We wanted to have access to mains water and to mains power, and we wanted to have a few acres of flattish ground that we could do, and we wanted to have some shade. We got all of those except for the shade. When we found this place, we'd looked at many places across the Fleurieu Peninsula, and none of them were suitable. And one day I walked into an office, land agent's office in Victor Harbour, and there was a young salesman there. He said, "I know just the place you're looking for, because people used to come here with the permission of the landowner to do some bush camping along the edge of the creek." So that's what made him think of it.
Yep.
And so the place had come up for sale. This was all part of Fork Tree Station. It had been subdivided, and there was 55 acres here that was up for sale.
Yep.
And so we saw this, and anyway, it all came together without going into too much about the finances and everything.
Where did you get the money from?
Well, we didn't have much in the assembly account, and we found this place which we fell in love with.
Yes.
And so we went across. We brought, remember one Sunday, half a dozen of us came down on a Sunday morning and had a look at it, and we loved it straight away. So we went across to Victor Harbour, and we made it. Well, the offer was, I think, 33,000, but they said that they'd come down to 30.
Yep.
And so, which sounds not much money, but it was a fair bit in those days.
Especially when you don't have that sitting in the bank.
That's right. So then we were signed up, and they said, "Oh, we want 10% deposit."
Yes.
I said, "Oh, would 5 be all right?" And we were a bit irregular, but we'll submit it to the vendor. When they did, and they were very keen to sell, and so they accepted the 5%, and then we had to raise the finance. Now, the bank wouldn't lend that because they didn't lend money on vacant land. It had to have a building on it. But there was a brother who'd sold a property, and he had some money, and he lent us the money, took out a mortgage over it, and we then took possession, and we said to the folks, let's put in, that each family could put in 3 years camp fees in advance, and we were taking into account what we'd save at Easter and at Christmas, where we used to go to Victor Harbour, Inland Valley Caravan Park. And so a lot of us decided we'd do that, and it was the princely sum of $100 per family for 3 years' fees. And so we put that in, and that was enough money to buy all of the materials for number 1 ablution block.
Yeah, right. Which we'll go and have a look at in a
We'll see
sec,
that later. And so we were able to build that with 99% of free labour.
Yeah, right.
And then we had a building, went back to the bank, and they'd lend us money. Then we were able to pay the brother back.
Amazing.
So
now this was we've just walked in from the main road,
Yes.
And so this was the original spot for the entrance point of the camp. Originally there was a ford here, or fjord, or depending on how you want to say it.
Yeah, it was. We called it a ford.
Yeah, so there's a creek running through
across
here.
there. Went across here somewhere, and this was the entrance to this property, and it just dipped down, and then there was the track that went from there.
Yeah.
So that was our entrance.
And
to
that got washed away in a flood or something? That was
some years later we had a big flood. We had 2 or 3 big floods,
Yep.
and one of them just completely washed the ford away.
A church campsite at Carrickalinga where more than 20 caravans were washed away by the floodwaters.
Caravan owners are still counting the cost of yesterday's downpour at Carrickalinga. The rain turned the Carrickalinga Creek into a torrent, flooding across the Adelaide Revival Centre campsite. More than 20 caravans were swept away, smashed like toys against trees and the riverbank. This van teetered precariously on the edge of a bridge as a backhoe was called in to salvage it. Council workers, State Emergency Service and CFS volunteers spent the day retrieving the wreckage.
One man and his wife came down here and they couldn't find the van at all. Eventually he found, it looks like the roof. He's not sure, but he thinks it's the roof of the van.
Debris carried by the swollen creek smashed into buildings. Insurance will not cover the damage, which is expected to run close to $200,000. With heavy rain continuing to fall, the campsite could again be inundated this evening. Van owners are already on standby to evacuate. SES crews are prepared for more damage tonight. This afternoon's rain signalled the edge of a cold front which has already lashed the west coast. The Weather Bureau says those strong squalls and thunderstorms should reach the city in the early hours. Mark Davies, National 9 News.
We've got a flood on our hands here at camp. It was amazing, I've never seen it come this wide. We're over the hill and we've got ourselves a major river flood here. We've got 3 caravans down here, we can't reach them. At the moment they're not moving, but we cannot get a vehicle in there. And the bridge over to the lockup is well and truly under, as you can see at the middle of the back of this picture.
So you've raised the money, you've settled on the property.
Yes.
What happened after that?
Well, we set to work. We went to the normal Christmas camp at Victor Harbour. We brought our caravans across here and camped along the side of the creek.
On this side of the creek?
The other side. We
yep.
went across there, that was our property. And we set to work clearing away the bushes along the edge. We got where we'd come from at the front. David Patterson had dug a trench in because the mains water from there, and we had water across the creek to give us the luxury of a nice cold shower. And we also built another little building which is called a long drop. And
so for those that don't know, that's a toilet without plumbing. It's just a big hole in the ground. Yep.
And so a number of us came across from Victor Harbour. We stayed here and we started clearing away the stuff and got ready. We'd put a plan into council for building the ablution block, and so within a few weeks we were, getting the foundations down and pouring the.
Well, let's head on and have a look at that. So how many people were in the fellowship at that time? And
we had about 200 adults, I think.
Okay.
And I remember saying to the council they wanted to know how big we liked it to get, and I said, "Oh well, we've got a couple hundred, and we might get up to 500 or 600 one day."
Yes.
Hopefully they've forgotten about that because we've got a lot more than that now.
So what's the most people we've had in a camp down here, do you think?
Oh, New Year's Eve is the biggest night of the year, and we have had over 1,000 people there on a New Year's Eve, maybe more than that.
Yeah, and there's I think over 300 or so sites here today.
Yes, I don't know the exact number, but there's a lot. Yes, this little piece of land here wasn't ours originally, but it was on a separate title because there's a public road that goes through here, and the previous owners had recognised that they could get a separate title for that little sliver of land along here.
Is that right?
And they had a title issued for that. And when we found out after we'd bought that it was for sale, and we bought that for $1,000, and there's not much land there, but it was we had a separate title. And so when we got an opportunity to buy the land later, which is now where we've got the office and the oval, we were able to get it taken off of the owners of that land and get it attached to this little title here.
And then that of course gave you the opportunity to build this road and this new bridge that goes across into the camp.
We realised that legally we were able to come across here, and so we built it, and this is 2 flat top rail trucks that we managed to buy, and we
as in like railway cars?
Yeah, the railway, you know, like you see them still to this day when they got a flat top rather than the container ones. And they took the wheels off and so on, and that's pretty strong stuff.
Wow.
So we were able to do that, put a concrete lid over it.
So I heard you had some problems with the locals when you first started building.
Before we were able to take possession of the land, we had to get the approval of the local council, and so we put in our submission, and I can well remember the day that we were granted permission. It was the Friday before the long weekend in October, and they had their council meeting, and the what he would have been the secretary of the council, or he was really the manager. He ran the council pretty much, and he said, "Look, ring me up Saturday morning at home and I'll tell you how you got on." And I rang him up. We were staying down at Moana in the caravan park having an outreach, and we rang up and he said, "Well, the council have agreed to you coming in."
Great.
And again, you know, we had to get a planning moval in. So that's when we all came down here, and where a lot of the assembly saw it for the first time. And it happened that the people who had given the idea to the salesman were down here, and we turned up like ants at a picnic.
And they were camped down here,
they were camped down here, and our folks were kicking the football around and all this sort of thing. What are you doing here? It wasn't their property anyway, you know, we were just
free camping
here. So anyway, we that was in October, and by Christmas time we had the plan in for number 1 ablution block, and that was approved. And so immediately after the Christmas camp at Victor Harbour, we brought our caravans across here and we prepared for that. And by the end of the month, we already had the foundations down for that ablution block.
Because of course you can't have a camp with lots of people without having, well, you could, but it'd be a lot harder.
You could, but I think we'd have a lot less people wanting to come.
So this is the building here, which is what we call number 1 ablution block, which is really a showers, toilets, laundry today.
That's right.
And so was this 1975 when you started construction on this?
Yes. So it would have been all during 1975 we were working on this, and we were by October 1975 we had this building up, and it's now divided up a bit more, but we had a ladies side and the men's side, and a big laundry on this end
Yes.
that we're looking at now. And so we had our first communion service here.
So this is in this
Yeah, that's
area
right.
in
Yep.
the end here.
And we had our first communion service here on the long weekend, back in the days when that weekend became our working bee weekend.
So this is the October long weekend,
October
1975.
1975.
Yeah, okay.
So we had this
This is,
building in here.
so this was a laundry.
Yeah, that's right. And that side of it as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's now a storeroom.
It's not a massive space. You must have
No,
crammed
well,
people in here.
It's twice of this.
Yeah.
And there was no ceiling. And we had the young people down here, and they were literally sitting in the rafters when we had our communion service. I remember standing in that corner and giving a talk, and there were young people looking down on me.
From the rafters,
Yeah,
from the
from
open
the
ceiling.
rafters, yes. And they enjoyed
funny.
themselves. So, yeah.
Wow. So 1975, you had your first fully fledged camp down here with the
Right.
toilet facilities built.
In the meantime, the power had been laid on, and that was quite a story too, because one of our conditions was to get mains electricity, and the electricity, I think it was called ETSA in those days, they brought the power in from the road to the Stobie pole over here, and it cost quite a lot of money, but they said that we could pay back for the installation of that with our bill, over a period of time.
Right, okay.
But it so happened that we became such good customers that after about 3 years they just waived the bill,
Is that right?
which they don't do these days.
They definitely don't do these days.
So,
What a great blessing that was.
and so we...
And so, of course, there was no hall here.
no,
So
there
it was a tent
no hall.
originally,
No.
big sort of marquee type
we
tent.
had caravans out here and down there, and at the end of the run down there, which is near the bottom of the hill there now, halfway between here and the current hall, we hired a big marquee where we had our meetings.
Yes.
And,
And so you hired that each time,
that's
each
right.
camp, and
Yeah.
they came.
Well, for Christmas we would have it down there, but Easter time the laundry became our makeshift kitchen, and we had power outlets here, and the marquee would go over the top of that, and so that we could hire urns and toasters and that sort of thing from within there. So that all worked together for us to.
And so, what was the next sort of major thing that you did after completing this toilet block?
Well, the same year we built the shed over here, which we used for storage, but that later became like a boys' dorm and so on. So that sort of got us by for a few years, but the assembly was growing so fast that we... So I think that the next major thing that we did was to build the hall.
All right, we'll go and have a look at the hall, because it's a pretty amazing building. That's really the hub and the central part of what camp is today. And it's a pretty big facility. Did you, when you envisaged building this hall, did you think about the growth of the church and building it big enough to cater for the growth? Or it looked like a pretty ambitious project.
Yes, well, we did, and we had spare space for a while, but people kept on witnessing to others and bringing all these people into our camp.
Fantastic.
Which we were delighted, of course. So, and when we laid it out, we got the plans, recommendations, and we built these roads here. We measured out the sites were recommended to be 10 metres square.
Yes.
And so you had, a 6 metre wide road, 10 metre site, 10 metre frontage, and then another one at the back of it, and another road with 6 metres there. So that's the way it was all laid out. And we've still got that design to this day, except that we started getting too many caravans on, and we had to reconfigure it a few years ago.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later because that was a pretty mammoth project.
Yes.
So you've designed the hall, you got obviously council approval to build that.
Yes. We got a contractor in to do that. So many things that fortunately for us, you can see the hand of the Lord in the hall.
Of course you can.
It was unfortunate for others. It was a downturn in the economy. And the bricklayers that came in, we engaged a team of bricklayers as well, and they were so hard up for work. The contractor was happy to basically build it at cost.
Wow.
Because he didn't want to put his gang off. So we let them camp here, and they built the hall and that ablution block at the same time, number 2 ablution block.
Yeah.
So that's the way that happened. So yeah, so it was.
So what year was that? 1978.
This hall would have been built in 1978.
Yeah.
And so as you can see, it's a pretty massive structure. But
massive.
later on, we extended part of it again.
Yes.
Because we kept running out of space.
Yeah.
So how old were you, Ben, when we got the camp?
So if it was 75, I would have been 4.
4.
Okay. I've actually found some footage of you and me.
Yes.
So I was 4 in my little tie-dye mid-70s t-shirt,
Yes.
running away from the camera. Well, let's go and have a look inside.
Yes.
So this, as you can see, the setup we've got here, we've got obviously, meeting style setup, and in the back part we've got tables because we're eating here as well. Yeah. But often, like on New Year's Eve, this is seats as far as the eye can see.
That's right. Plus the overflow into the marquee that we put up outside. And of course we got the kitchen, which is we put that in right from the start. Yeah. Although we had to upgrade it, it wasn't quite up to regulations, but we gradually learned to conform. Yeah. Yes.
It's such a great venue. I mean, in here, obviously plenty of meetings. Yes. Come kids camp, there's activities in here, and teens camp, there's sport in here, and it just gets used for such an amazing variety of wonderful activities.
Yes. Well, camps, we got it mainly for Christmas and Easter, but over the years we've found so many other uses for the different segments in the assembly, including for the fact that we've got over 350 people here this weekend, and 100 of them are visitors from outside of Adelaide. And we've got this leadership camp here, which is so ideal for that. And we have Christmas and Easter. We have zone camps. We have 3 of those. We have kids camp, what age do they go from?
I think they're primary school, and I think it's teens camp for high school.
That's right.
And then youngies camp.
And then senior young people. And we have a seniors camp, and there's getting a lot of us now too.
Well, so you've had a few caretakers over the years, haven't you? When was the first time you had a caretaker live down here?
Well, there was forget his name now, there was an older gentleman who just decided he retired. Yeah. He lived up Elizabeth Way, but he brought his caravan down here and just was looking after the gardens and that sort of thing. And then we got Eddie Brunei.
I remember Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie was a veteran from the Second World War. Oh, yes. And he was an interesting character.
I think I got in trouble a lot with Eddie for riding my bike too fast. I think then that turned into driving my car too fast in here.
That's right, yes. He's gone to be with the Lord now. And then after Eddie we had, I think it would have been Mike and Sue O'Reilly, who retired. And then after them I think we had Chris and Mary Lenardis here for a while, and then eventually we got Ray and Liz Fisher, who are just made for the job, and they just do a brilliant job keeping an eye on everything. And the thing we realised too, that it was too much for one person, and so we have a caretaker resident, but we also have a camp manager, and Mike Murray has done that, even though he doesn't live here, but he sort of has managed all the maintenance of the buildings and that's an enormous job, which...
And an enormous amount of volunteers and tradespeople and...
Right, so we're still relying very much on volunteers to come and do things, and yeah. All right. We'll come and see you later.
So we've got some buildings over here.
Yes.
This one's a prayer room, and there's some pastors' quarters.
That's right.
They came from another campsite, I think.
That's right. Well, they came from the Woodside Army Camp.
Okay.
And they were built in 1939 at the beginning of the Second World War. And so by the time we got them, they were halfway through their life.
Pretty second hand.
Yes, and so we bought them at auction and dismantled them and brought them down here. It took us, a couple of weeks to dismantle them, and we got a carrier to bring all the stuff down there, and then we had to put the jigsaw puzzle back together.
And so when you mean dismantle, are you taking
we
apart completely, or have you got
we
sort
took
of
them
panels?
apart and cut them up into sections, including the floor. Some of it was asbestos that couldn't be replaced.
Yes.
And this used to be the mess, as they call it.
The mess hall for the officers of the army.
Appropriately for the army, the officers' mess. And so we actually enlarged that, and that became our prayer room, which we're very proud of now. It's been done up recently.
Yeah.
And
it's used every Tuesday night, I think, for
that's
meetings
right,
down
and they
here
now
as
have
well.
a midweek meeting here. And that's also used as a dormitory for the kids' camp and so on. And we've got 1, 2, 3 of the other pastors. I've got my own place, which I got built back in about 1983 or something like that, because I was the only pastor for quite a while, and I found I had a lot of people wanted to talk to me at Christmas time. We had a caravan, but if I wanted to private talk to people, I had to get the family to go away, and I thought that wasn't fair, so I thought I'll get a bigger caravan so we can have a little private room. But they were so dear, it was just as cheap to build that, and with voluntary labour, they built a nice cabin for us and had plenty of room to talk to people, and so that was the only one for a while. But when we got the opportunity to get this, we had like our 3 senior pastors, and one from Woodcroft, one from the Bogue, and one from Elizabeth, and they were in those other 3 units here and the big prayer room. And also we got 2 very large dormitories up on the hills. So we got them at the same time.
Did you? Right.
Yeah.
Shall we go and have a look at those?
Yes, can do.
Now, it's got an interesting name, these big dormitories up on the hill.
Yes.
It's called KFC. Why?
Yes.
Why is it called KFC?
Well, the original part of it, now that was something we built afterwards, separate from the ones which were the dormitories. When it came to getting these buildings, well, we got those ones up there, 2 long buildings, which used to be, I think they were single rooms that they used to have their troops able to have a room to themselves. Yeah. But we got squeezed as many people as we could into them, and we built those 2. But then we saw an opportunity. We picked up the paper one Wednesday morning in the building materials, and there was a developer asking if anybody was interested in taking away a school building, because he was on a deadline to get rid of it. Yes. So it was either get someone to take it in or come in with a bulldozer. So I rang him up and said we were interested, and he said, I've got someone else that wants it. They're going to let me know by 6 o'clock tonight. And so anyway, he rang me back at 6 and they said they can't do it. It had to be out in 4 days. So I think I went to the Elizabeth meeting that night and said, well, can we have some helpers? So yeah, they poured out and we dismantled this building. It was a school building, and it was in sections which were in feet, 4 by 8 feet or whatever you see, or 2.4 by 1.2 or whatever. And so we dismantled it in 2 days, and on the Saturday we got a carrier to come and pick it up when the Elizabeth people loaded onto the truck, and the Woodcroft people unloaded at this end.
Right.
And I think we already had those there, and so again we had a heap of building material, which we put it together and made a dormitory out of it.
Yeah, right, wow.
And we built the number 4 ablution block there after about that time.
Yeah.
But this building here, it was in 2 parts. You can see by the roof line that it's in 2 parts.
Yeah.
Now, for this one, when it was sitting on its own, it looked for all the world like a KFC a kitchen
right,
sort of
so
thing.
that's where the name came from.
That's where the name came from. Yeah. So, but it was so good. Again, see these people here, they just, you know, book a room for, and they just sleep in there.
Yeah.
They haven't even got PowerPoints. We didn't even want them.
This is like a bunks.
Yeah,
bunk
that's
sort of
right.
set up through
bunks
here.
And, we didn't want to put power in there because of the fire risk.
Yes.
And they eat in there and they have a ball.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great communal area,
yeah.
and some people, the first thing they do is they want to book in here and to eat in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, but we've been so fortunate. There was a school that closed down a few years ago, and there was a whole heap of stuff that was being taken out. They were going to bulldoze the place, and we got to hear about it, and we're pretty good scavengers. And we got some very good things, and our folks installed them here, and got some really nice kitchen cupboards now.
Yeah.
So
every tree that we've walked past has been planted.
Yes.
By
except
fellowship
for
folk.
along the creek.
Except for along the creek. Wow.
Yeah. And we used to have working bees because there was a lot of, this was a farmer's paddock and he'd cultivated, and there was a lot of small rocks, maybe about, from very small up to, you know, diameter of 150 millimetres or something.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, there's old creek courses went through here, and there was a lot of gravel and so on. So we used to have working bees picking them up, and
just picking up rocks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know, young, old, and in between were all picking them up, and we reused them because we had to have the soakage trenches for the sewerage, and the idea with them is that you get a trench dug, and then you lay these rye boxes, they call them, which are they're like a half circle, upside cut in halves, over with holes in them, and you put them on the ground, and then you put the rocks around them, and then a sort of a porous blanket over the top, and put the soil back in, and the sewage that's come through the septic tank goes in there, and it drains away.
Yeah.
So the rocks
Breaks
got
down.
used again as well, you see.
Yeah. So a few years ago, Pastor John, the council wanted you to change a number of things around here because standards had changed, obviously code had changed, and they needed you to do a whole bunch of effectively redevelopment almost of this whole sort of area.
That's right. Well, I think it was partly our own fault. I think we'd let it get to look a bit unloved.
Yeah.
I think that the nationwide push was for all caravan parks to have what they call grey water,
Yes.
which is collecting the water from the sinks from caravans and sort of you know, putting it into pipelines and taking
not
it
just into a bucket or out into the ground.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Although we had got by for years because the soil was very porous and we couldn't understand why we had to do it. Rules come from the top, and so they got us to. They told us that we had to do it. In fact, they came down and they virtually said, "Well, unless you do this, we'll close you down." So we got
So they
to
threatened
work.
to close you down. Wow. Okay.
Yes, and there was safety issues as well as far as the fire alarm system and everything, which is fair enough, and that got done as well.
Yeah. And there was some stuff around the spacing of sites as well.
Yes. Well, whereas I was explaining, we had the sites 10 by 10, because we were getting so many people in, we decided to put a space that was designed for 2 caravans to put 3. So that meant about 6.5 metres. And as well as that, we had a lot of trees that had grown up very big and they were taking up room.
Yeah.
So it was becoming dangerous as far as fire was concerned. So we negotiated with the council and they agreed that they could be still 10 metres deep, but 8 metres gap. So that meant we had to redesign it. And while we were putting in what we call the grey water, people who know this, plumbing types and so on, they said, well, it's exactly the same rules for black water it is for grey water. And so we were then able to, which is what comes out of toilets and so on, so we were able to then connect up our ablution blocks to the same system.
Right.
And so it was exactly that time, it was probably at least 10 years ago when all this was happening, and the trees had grown up big and we had to get rid of a lot of them. And it's what you see now is pretty nice.
Yeah, it is
we could do with a bit more shade, but a lot of people have built their own shades. There are 2 pumps in here. I think they must be submersible pumps, and so they pump the effluent that is what they call it pulverises everything, you know.
Yeah.
And but then it is pumped to up the hill, and we had it going right to our septic tank, which I don't know if you feel like climbing a hill, but that's way up on the hill, and that is huge.
I know there's been a lot of people working pretty hard over the last couple of years to build this amazing playground for the kids.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, entertainment for kids when I was a kid was sliding down these big hills on pieces of cardboard and wearing out the trousers.
Yes, that's
when
right.
I was a kid.
Yeah.
But now they've got this great facility, here.
Yeah, so a lot of our young fathers have been behind doing this work here.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a bit of motivation of having grizzly kids to make them something that will keep them happy. And
out here, this lawn area, has seen many a sporting event, many a
that's right,
young people's event, and kids' games, and all sorts of things. It is a very popular area.
And
I think we even had a meeting out here.
yeah,
A nighttime meeting
at
Christmas
time.
Christmas time, which
Yes, that's right.
was fantastic. Nice balmy summer's night. It was lovely.
Yeah, because of COVID restrictions,
Yeah.
we're very careful to make sure that we abide by the government regulations. I think the Bible says that you mightn't agree with the government in some things, but what do? You don't get out and protest. You pray for them.
Yeah.
And and I think they need a lot of prayer at the moment, not just because of us.
These are used for people who've got special needs. There's obviously a first aid room.
That's right.
First
yes.
aid room here.
Yeah, that's right.
Shall we go over and have a look over the hill?
Yeah, by all
Are
means.
you up for a walk up Jacob's Ladder?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I'll sleep better tonight. Yeah.
So this is the famous Jacob's Ladder.
Yep.
Why is it called Jacob's Ladder?
Well, there's a biblical background to it. There was a story in the Bible about Jacob when God was just reassuring him about his future for him and his descendants. And he had a dream, and he saw this ladder going back up to heaven. And so that's why we called it Jacob's Ladder. But this doesn't quite reach to heaven here. It only gets us to the top of the hill.
Now I remember there was a famous story about a water tank that used to be positioned here, and a go-kart event which involved a go-kart coming from up on this road. And
Well, there was a team of go-karts.
a team of go-karts, was there?
Yeah, it was a competition.
Right.
And we finished up banning it. I was very unpopular for banning it. We had a water tank over here, and one of the go-karts lost control, raced up that embankment and went back and into our water tank and split the thing.
And it just exploded with water.
Exploded, the water went everywhere. So yeah, so we have a bit of fun, and we haven't killed anybody yet.
Let's hope it stays that way.
Yeah.
So this down here is what we call over the hill.
Yes,
There's quite a
that's
number of sites over here, and again another toilet block and showers, etc.
That's right.
And so this used to be an oval. I remember playing cricket here as a kid.
That's right. Yep.
Over here.
Yes. Yeah, we had a concrete pitch out in the middle of that area.
Yeah.
And but we needed the space for caravans. Ablution block over there, which is sort of a match in design to number 2.
Yeah.
So it's a lovely view from here.
It is amazing.
We've got the creek along there with the. G'day, Jed.
So the creek, as a kid, the creek was almost magnetised. You know,
Yes.
we would be down the creek all the time, catching yabbies and
That's right,
skimming
yeah.
stones and doing all sorts of things
I
down
can
there.
remember when my now 58-year-old son was a young fella, and he and his mates went down to the creek and caught some little fish.
Yes.
And came home. We were still in the caravan, and they got my wife to cook them, and they tasted like mud. And she was in trouble because she'd ruined their fish.
We might go and have a look at the other great part of this camp, which is the beach. What do you reckon?
Yeah,
Should we go and have a look at the beach?
good.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're on the main Carrickalinga beach, Pastor John, which is not that far from the campsite. And it's played a pretty important role in the history of the fellowship, and in fact in many people's lives, because lots of people have been baptised down here.
That's
haven't
right. Yes, yep. That's right. Well, one of the criteria for us getting a campsite was to have access to a good beach, and boy, we've done well with that one.
Oh, this is a cracker.
Yeah, this is absolutely beautiful patch here. Wonderful place. People have a lot of fun. I mean, we've had the place for well over 40 years now, and we used to come down here and get in the water, and I remember we used to play a bit of sort of our version of water polo, and I used to do very well being tall until Pastor Paul came to the Lord, and he could outreach everybody. But so we had fun, and so the campsite serves 2 purposes. One is it's a fantastic holiday destination, and we can make it affordable for families to be able to come, because some working class families got a lot of children, they can't afford a lot, but if they can't afford a caravan, they can probably get a tent, and we've got some accommodation as well. But as far as coming to the beaches, because we preach the gospel to people, and we sometimes come down here to baptise somebody, and people to hear the gospel, because what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's just so scriptural. So here we are, we come down here, and we sing along, and we've had some great experiences, and it's been transforming for people's lives when they get baptised, they receive the Holy Spirit, they speak in tongues, and it's just the start of a new life, and what a place to start a new life.
So of course this is a hive of activity for plenty of our camps. You know, kids come down here and have beach day and youngies camps. It's a great place for lots of fun and enjoyment.
A lot of people didn't know about the secret of Carrickalinga. When somebody suggested that we look for right here, I didn't even know it existed.
Certainly has been a wonderful facility that's really played such an integral part of so many people's lives, and plenty of people have been saved here and started their journey with Christ here,
and just families came at different times. I mean, you were a little boy.
Yes.
I was a young dad, and then the children grew up and got married, had kids. My daughter is now a grandma, which makes me a great grandpa, and of course they come here. So my children came here, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren, and so on. And you know, so anyway,
good.
Well,
thanks for sharing the story. That was fantastic.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks for that, Ben. Thanks for the opportunity to do it.
Good.
Yeah, all right. God bless.
God bless.